To give recognition for the brothers and sisters who've made this great church the shrine of the Black Madonna. Let's give them a great big hand, brothers and sisters. To the Honorable Brother Clay, who saw to it that we've got to start deifying our own babies. But we don't deify our own image. I mean, isn't that a beautiful image of the Black Madonna looking down on the first black child?
NBC's Claudio Lavonga is in Vatican City. Claudio, what do we know about what happened at that meeting this morning? And can you explain to the viewers who don't know why this is so rare?
Well, Alex, as far as meetings go, it doesn't get more historic than this one. As soon as we saw the two popes together, we knew that this was a one of a kind. They were both dressed in white, of course, the only difference being with Pope Francis was wearing a little sash and a little cape there. Pope Benedict XVI, the emeritus, of course, walked to the helipad in his walking cane, looking very frail, waiting for the Pope Francis to arrive in his white helicopter, and they embraced in a long embrace. That was one of the first moving moments of this historic meeting, because after that they went into the summer residence, went to into the private chapel to pray together, and Pope Benedict XVI offered to Pope Francis the stool that is reserved for popes to pray in front of the altar. And Pope Francis said, no, we are brothers, and we are going to pray together. And so they did. They kneeled together on the same stool in a very symbolic moment, of course. So then they went into the library, and Pope Francis gave Pope Benedict XVI a small icon of Our Lady of Humility, and he said, well, the first person I thought of when I saw this icon was you. Well, of course, again, expressing and extending his gratitude for the 8 years of his papacy. And they went on into a very informal lunch, and then he flew back to the Vatican with the same helicopter. Well, I must say, to the great disappointment of the hundreds of people that gathered in Castel Gandolfo, hoping for the Pope or the popes together to appear on that balcony, Alex.
Yes, but nonetheless, what a day, and what pictures you are able to bring us. Thank you so much, NBC's Claudio Lavonga from...
Give me back the knowledge that y'all fucking took from us that's in the bottom of the fucking Vatican. That's what I want. All your fucking hope and your promises and shit, fuck that. That's the one thing that I don't want for y'all generation. And the reason why people ask me why am I such a revolutionary, it is because of your generation. I'll tell you why. They say that your generation is a lost generation. That is a fucking lie. Y'all don't give a fuck about nothing. Y'all don't give a fuck about religion. Y'all don't give a fuck about the old leaders. Fuck Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton and the rest of them motherfuckers. But the sad thing about that is if we as elders don't add something to it, then y'all just gonna be a blank fucking sheet of paper. But it is our responsibility to teach y'all. If y'all fucked up, it's our fault. I totally believe that shit. Y'all are a reflection of us. Whether we did or did not teach y'all, it's on us. It ain't y'all fault. It's our fault.
The need today, and this is Sister Kemp, here's the answer to the question you asked earlier. The need today is for black Africans who have been divinely called out and set apart for the particular purpose and or mission of liberating, resurrecting, and empowering other black Africans. The need today is for them to get serious about their assignment and stop being distracted and start bringing forth some fruit. That's the need today.
I know when we walk and some people say, well, I don't want to come to that event because they're going to talk about all that black stuff. We're talking about the black stuff that was for the dawn of time. We're talking about the black stuff that came from the fallopian tube of the Nile Valley. Without that first black stuff, meaning first black man and woman, we wouldn't even have humanity on the planet Earth. So today I'm honored not only to talk about it, but to give visual documentation, as our Tajiri Asa Hilliard told us, that it's the Grand Masters, like Dr. Yosip Inyakinen that I heard at Long Beach State in the early 70s. Like you, I was also in the audience. I did not know a lot about African history. Of course, we were all going through the psychological gas chamber in the Eurocentric classroom. And Dr. Ben said a lot of powerful things that day, and I came up to him, I said, you said a lot of powerful things. I said, can you prove that? He said, I can take you back and I can show you. He said, but what we need are young soldiers like you to go back and do field research. At that time that I would travel back to Africa 14 years non-stop with that great Grand Master Tajiri, Dr. Yosip Inyakinen. now going on 22 years of my life, studying the reliefs, being able to see where these people literally copied, plagiarized directly from African people to make up this European version of Christianity. Yes, I'm saying a European version of Christianity because African people were Christians before white folks were Christian. In fact, we were persecuted for being Christians in Africa, in North Africa, long before the Romans were even Christians. We're going to deal with that. But also we need to start to develop libraries in our home. We need to stop looking at the television telling us nothing but lies. And in some cases, brothers and sisters, the TV's getting bigger than this screen here. And a 12 by 12 living room. You don't need to see white folks that well. You don't need to see white folks that well. But after all, images shape our reality. So because we come from a visual literate documentation, I equally have to come with that. And we are on different levels, so I try to bring this information on different levels, brothers and sisters, especially dealing with religion. I mean, dealing with religion, you can really start a whole lot of fights with religion. But what we want to do is clean house. And we want to go down deep in our spiritual subconscious, because in our spiritual subconscious, white folks have created something called spiritual enslavement. What is spiritual enslavement? Spiritual enslavement is when the enemy became the deity in the spiritual subconscious of our mind. That means white folks made himself God down into the psychic of black people. So we could not see that Murray, that love for each other, because we could not see that divine creator that our ancestors knew by many names emanating from each and every one of us as black people, because the enemy became the deity in the spiritual subconscious of our mind. What was the effect when they came into Africa? Christianity that existed in the Nile Valley. Also, what happened when Europeans got a hold of Christianity? And after all, what kind of Christians did they make us when they brought us over on the good ship Jesus, the Grace of God, and the Holy Mary, the name of their slave ships? Made us a totally different Christians. We want to deal with that. We want to deal with the images behind closed doors in the cellar where the Pope secretly worships the Black Madonna. I have the visual documentation. We're going to see it. And then we want to go deep into Kemet to show, brothers and sisters, that this spiritual concept existed for thousands of years. The Christ had nothing to do with a man. It had to do with the spirit that our ancestors called it in ancient times the Ka. And then when the Gnostics got it, it was called the Charis. And during the Greco-Roman period, they turned it into the Christ.
Most indigenous people believe the same thing. Look at native Africans. I'm not talking about the people that invaded, because most of the religions in Africa are the religion of the people that conquered that area. But we're talking about the indigenous people. They mostly believe that God is in everything. The Native Americans believe that God was in everything. All of the indigenous people basically believe the same thing. All of the rest of the stuff, for the most part, besides what indigenous people believe in, is a control mechanism. Remember this, all of the days that you live, son. If your religion has to be translated for you, it is not your religion.
We've heard white folks out of the story, is that right? What we want to do in this particular presentation on the Black Christ Conference is to see our African ancestors' side of the story. And then you put it in your own Ma'atian court of law. And then you judge it for yourself. I'm not here for you to believe what I say. I did not come for that. We'll keep that up to the Negro preacher, not the liberating preacher, fleecing you for all your money in the name of God. What we want you to do is to think. Because once you start thinking about what has happened, what has taken place, then you will be able to see that spiritual light through the needle's eye.
This business about color, I raised it in one of the segments in this program. Is it important to worry about and argue about this issue of color and what color the Egyptians were?
Egyptians had no special color. They were Africans, light skin, dark skin, black, brown. You've got to understand that at the time of the early Egyptians, there were no Greeks yet, and there were no Romans. The Greeks and the Romans did not come until about 1000 BC. The Hebrews did not come in until the Egyptians were already in the 13th dynastic period. It was strictly an African culture.
This is the purification rites, or baptism of the Pharaoh. This is the god Tahuti, sometimes called Thot if you're using from the Greek way. He is holding the jar, the goblet, with the holy water, and on the opposite side is Haroes holding another. They're pouring the holy water over the Pharaoh.
Which Pharaoh?
This is Ptolemy 11th or Ptolemy 12th. You notice that the holy water is made up of Ankh and was scepter. Ankh was scepter, Ankh was scepter. The Ankh is the key of life, the symbol of the key of life. The was scepter is the highest authority of the king.
So baptism didn't take place when you were an infant?
Oh no. Well, baptism goes back for thousands of years, long before the story of Jesus and John the Baptist.
But contrary to the way we've been taught to think of baptism, it took place when you were grown.
Oh yes.
It's at the school of Amen, Ipit Rasut, or Ipit Asut, and other temples where the priests also baptized the initiates once they finished 40 years. This is long before John the Baptist. Now, this temple called Karnak today, or Ipit Asut, as our ancestors called it, going into this temple, as I said, these are temples or books in stone. The pylons are pages of history telling of our story. But as you go into the temple, you see the ram symbolized as Amen. That was the Zoot type as Amen. Now, we see Ursa Ma'at Ra, Septepan Ra Ramesu Mary Amen, a little practice you can say it too. Here we see that was his throne name, as they call Ramsey from Ramesu, is now under the ram, symbolizes Amen. 2,000 years ago, our ancestors worshiped Amen, and his symbol was the ram because the sun was in the constellation of Aries. I show this because let's go to Christian art, and you see the ram in the European Roman Christian art. Why is that ram in their Christian art? Because they were deifying and worshiping Amen. Is this animal worship here? If they have the animal ram represented as Amen in their art, and it's not animal worship, why they come into Kemet and say animal worship and pagan and heathen and polytheism and all these other type of negative terms? Let's look at this. When you also go and look at and see the ram or the lamb over, as you see a Roman character of a Jesus here, it looks like. But when you look at that figure with the ram or the lamb over the shoulders, it was taken from Kemet when I showed you when the ram or the lamb in ancient Kemet, where the king became one with Amen and the Zoot type was the ram. But let's go over 4,000 years ago to the Tomb of Mary Coe. In the Tomb of Mary Coe of the 6th dynasty, over 4,000 years ago, that existed thousands of years ago on your reliefs in the books in stone with the ram or the lamb around his head long before the Roman art. There's a couple reliefs that I want to point out to you just to evoke some thought, because a lot of things I'm going to do is to evoke some thought, to give you some ideas, concepts that were here long before the Western world was even in existence. Mary Coe, Mastaba of Mary Coe, and this is Teti. And Mary Coe is the Grand Vizier, or the Tajeti for Teti. All right? So that's very important. So I'm going to show you, yeah, the Tajeti. He's a Tajeti. That means Vizier. For Teti. Okay. We'll leave an opening in case people have to walk through there. I'm going to show you here, as you see the priest with the ram around his neck. But when we look at Leonardo da Vinci's artwork, you see Leonardo da Vinci's artwork with the lamb or ram around his neck. You can see where the origin of that came from. But this is carved in Mary Coe's tomb over 4,000 years ago, long before Leonardo da Vinci's European image of the Jesus that you see right here. But even when you look at the European Jesus, let's go see where Leonardo da Vinci copied his European Jesus from. This is one of the oldest pictures I've found of Jesus, and it's in England, with the lamb or ram around his shoulders. As you see with this relief, goes back over 4,000 years ago, where you are now in Mary Coe's tomb. to see that this was an ancient spiritual concept. These were the priests who went to school for 40 years. So you see this as ancient African origin of the lamb and the ram that's equated with European Christianity and also with the Christ. But they never show you this. I can't say use the word Jesus because that's Greek, but I would have to use the African Hebrew word, and that's Yeshua that you see right here. But the emphasis I want to put on the fact that this is carved in stone, brothers and sisters, thousands of years ago, that ends up in Western European Christianity today. But here's the black man that they never show you, that Leonardo da Vinci copied it directly from African people, that it was thousands of years before Leonardo da Vinci. You see it on the temples of Africa. This is one of the sculptures of Europeans of Jesus as a good shepherd with the lamb around his head. But when I went to England to the museum, the brother saw me with all the equipment and he said, "Brother, what are you all about?" I said, "I'm here to document our story. You got anything in here?" He said, "I'll help you out." He took me in the back room where the tourists don't go. And you know what he showed me? Where they copied it from right here. Wow. Oh, yes, brothers and sisters, huh? It's time for the liberation of your mind now, huh? This is what they got locked up in the museum in England right now today, showing the true African Jesus right here, where the Europeans copied from this one to make their version of it right here. Even Reverend Bar Shango said that Jesus was from the tribe of the Black Panthers. I noticed that there was a Black Panther down by his legs. Huh? Well, I like how y'all did that lean at the same time.
Speaking about knowledge, you mentioned that the 10 Commandments, when we were in Egypt, you mentioned that the 10 Commandments that we are aware of are derived from 42 commandments that carry another name, the negative confessions.
Or admonitions to Goddess Ma'at.
I see.
And they're thousands of years older than the so-called 10 Commandments. You see,
we have some visuals that are on the that you took on the wall. There it is.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Those are the negative confessions.
Those are the some of the 42 negative confessions.
Now, when you say negative confessions, that means...
Because they start in negative. Hail Ma'at, I have not killed man or woman. Hail Ma'at, I have not made light thy bushel. Hail Ma'at, I have not spoken ill of the God.
So these are...
These would be the English version
I have not, as opposed to thou shalt
not.
Professor Joseph Ben Yakinen is an Egyptologist, having taught at Cornell University for over 15 years. Dr. Ben, as he is affectionately known, has lectured widely on both sides of the Atlantic. His theme, the ancient civilizations of Egypt. His presentations have placed him in great demand by students and community groups, especially those of African descent. Perhaps the high regard he enjoys today stems from his long, unwavering theme that the ancient civilizations along the Nile were African.
And so you're saying then that the people of Central Africa migrated north up along this river?
Yes, I'm saying that the original high culture, where the people first start to make scratches, symbols, writing down, hieratic and so forth, finally develop into alphabetical presentations, mathematical signs, religious signs and symbols and so forth. They actually had their beginning in Central East Africa.
On the wall, quotations from the various holy books. Goddess Ma'at to recite the 42 admonitions to her, otherwise called the negative confessions.
From which came
10 of them is called the 10 Commandments. Moses is supposed to have gotten it on Mount Sinai, but I don't know how he could get that when it was already been taught to everyone in Egypt at the education center at Luxor. Luxor was then called Set. The Greeks came and changed that name to Thebes. The Arabs came and changed it to Luxor.
What we're not looking at, though, is the architectural achievement. This passageway and this whole tomb is cut into the side of a mountain.
It's cut into the side of a mountain, and then it is smoothed Then it is carved and then painted into the beautiful colors you see here.
Wait, they had to know what they were doing as far as tolerance?
They are the architects and engineers. This wasn't haphazard guesswork.
And what is this? What is this? The tomb, actual
Sarcophagus, and where the body was put into, hermetically sealed. That's the big one, and there was a smaller one inside of that big one. So plus the wrappings that the body was in, and kept the body for thousands of years.
And this is the tomb of Ramesses IV.
Ramesses IV, one of the Ramesside kings.
The Valley of the Kings looks down on a flatlands area that is almost level with the Nile River. And in this area stands the huge colossus of the pharaoh Amenhotep III. This pharaoh sired a son who would have a major impact on the religious concepts of succeeding civilizations, because this son, Amenhotep IV, also known as Akhenaten, formulated the concept of one supreme god, known as monotheism. These gigantic colossus were carved out of a single piece of sandstone. Dr. Ben and his accompanying guide talk to me about these colossus.
Why are these colossus so far away from the Valley of the Kings?
Yes, they were in front of the temple, the funerary temple. At that time, being 18th dynasty, they have been constructed temples so far to mislead the grave robbers.
Tell me something. Do you ever have the feeling that they haven't found all the tombs?
They found the 62 of one period, but there are other pharaohs missing of other periods.
And nobody knows where they're buried?
No, they could be anywhere in Egypt, because...
digging in Egypt by luck, by chance, like Howard Carter has been discovered, King Tut by luck.
But sheer luck. As a matter of fact, it was Sheikh Abdul Rahman, his father, was the one that found the tomb, and Howard Carter get the credit.
The credit, yes.
Is it true what they're saying, that Howard Carter turned out to be a grave robber himself?
All of them.
That he kept some of it for himself?
All of them kept for themselves. And they sold to museums, and they kept for themselves, and they sold to museums. But they blamed the people who were equally robbing the tombs. But when they robbed the tombs, they didn't keep the monuments, the artifacts to themselves. Somebody got it, and they don't have it, so somebody got it. The central figure in this, all of these things, in this particular temple, will be Goddess Isis. This is her temple. And when you look at this, you will see Goddess Isis and other gods, God Horus, which, by the way, is her son. But you're dealing with Horus, or Heru, as the proper name would be, at various periods of his life. You would see then various gods. You see there Goddess Hathor, which became the surrogate mother of God Heru. So the story is going to give you, from here, you will see other phases of this when you go to other temples. When we go inside, we will see that the early Christians set their cross, and they're going to put them on columns and on the walls. They set their various instruments for worship, like altar and so forth.
You mean they commandeered this temple for their own uses?
Right. They considered heathen and pagan, but they used the same heathen and pagan temple for their own church. This is the purification rites, or baptism. You see the water, symbolically the water, comprises of the ankh and the was scepter. Both things together, intermittently, ankh, was scepter, as the water. See, they're hanging down there at the bottom? And this
is being baptized?
The Pharaoh.
Now, as we go back in here now, that is
the altar that the Christians use. The original altar that the ancient Egyptians used, that has gone.
But it was in that room that was known as the Holy of Holies.
Holy of Holies, or the sanctuary.
And that was
only the high priest.
In a sense, then, that was violated.
Oh yes, oh yes. That is the most sacred part of the temple. People in the States arguing all the time that the ankh comes from the cross. Not at all. There is an ankh, and there is a cross. Ankh there, and a cross to your left, and up. They mean two different things, have always meant two different things. Never has one been the other. And here you have Goddess Hathor and the Queen Cleopatra.
This is Cleopatra.
Cleopatra. One of the better image of her that you would see.
It's not too much like Liz Taylor, though.
Oh no, not at all.
And the hair.
No, not at all. That is actually, you could see coarse hair, curl up, and then here's God Horus again.
Over on the right,
yes. Horus in this case.
Dr. Ben, what is this?
This is an ancient calendar of the times when they was based upon the lunar calendar. If you would notice, it is based upon the moon and then the sun. For instance, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 and 4 is 8, the month, 8th month. This would be 2, 4, 5, the 5th month. The 4th, see, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th month. See, the 11th month, and so forth. So that you know what year it was, what month.
Did they have the 365-day?
365 and a quarter day, corrected each 4th year. But they had a 13-month calendar. There was 12 months of 30 days each, and 1 month of 5 days. If you look, you would notice Goddess Nut's head here, her hands hanging down there, her body comes this way, her foot goes down, and then you see the sun, God Ra, comes as the sun with all its rays, and the rays coming from her, the sun comes out of her vagina, and the rays go over Goddess Hathor. Hathor holding the tree of life, and her head is staying on a mountain. Then you see the sun going back in the night as the moon and going back through her body. She takes it back through her mouth. It goes again around her body and comes out through her vagina constantly, because the wall never ends.
The whole cycle of life, then?
Yes, sir. Wall never ends.
Revolves around the female.
Yes.
What's it the next?
The next is the preparation of the coronation scene with the putting of the crown and the pharaoh's head. And here you have the god Nit and goddess putting the goddesses Nith, another one, putting the crown on the king's head. And Horus, witness it. Horus is carrying the was scepter. You remember you just saw the was scepter in the thing? This is the highest authority, the was scepter.
And you can see that's Horus because it's the head of the falcon.
He's carrying the head of the falcon on the head, on the disc of God Ra, on the head.
What would possess somebody to look at something this magnificent and mark it up like that, then defile it with their name?
There are many factors. 1, hate. 2, grudge. 4, their own smallness. And 5, it's a means of saying, I did it.
Now, in between these figures is a passageway. What's in there?
That's to get into the temple. That is an actual temple with a hypostyle hall, although there are only 4 columns on each side. And then on the walls, you will see the wars that Ramesses II fought with the Hittites and others. Of course, no record of the war, any war with the Hebrews, none whatsoever.
Right. And at the end of the corridor, there's a little chamber. What's that?
There's what you call the antechamber, and the next chamber to that, the last, would be the Holy of Holies, or the sanctuary.
Holy of Holies.
And inside the Holy of Holies would have the triad. Like you have the Trinity.
Yes.
That's where the concept of ancient Egyptian in every city had a holy triad, T-R-I-A-D, 3 gods. Normally a god, a goddess, and a god. A god, the Father, a goddess, the Mother, and a God, the Son. The Holy Trinity that Christianity adopted. You notice this side. These are supposed to be the Asian captives of war of Ramesses II. You notice that? Carefully. Now let's shift side. These are supposed to be Nubians or generally Africans, but they are tied the exact same way as these on the side. Yet, in America, in the classroom, these are called Negro slaves of Ramesses. But these are called, in the same textbook, by the same professors, Asian captive or Semitic captives.
Prisoners of war.
No. Yes, prisoner of war here, but slaves there. Now, what made the difference?
Go and see. I can't possibly imagine.
All right, my brother.
Go ahead.
Here is another scene. This is very important because it shows the Pharaoh paying homage to Goddess Isis, or Goddess Aset, sitting on the birth chair.
What do you mean? Birth chair? What do you mean? This is how deliveries were made from a stool like that?
Right. And if you notice her breast, that it's full.
Yes.
Full of lactation for when she has a baby. And notice again that the stomach is large, showing that she's pregnant. But equally, you notice they were prepared just in the event that she had any trouble. Here is the surgical instrument. If she had running into trouble.
All these surgical scissors?
Scissors, the knives, the scalpel.
The scalpel up here.
Up there, you have those little things that they use to retractors and everything like that.
Isn't that something?
Those were old instruments. And here is the man, Imhotep, who used to be the great
Saqqara, the step
That's right. And look at this, where you used to wash the hand to keep. You see, they said that Pasteur, and Madame Curie and all of them started thinking about cleanliness. This is way back there. One had to wash one hand before one committed surgery. This is the temple of Ramesses III and others. But what's unique about this, Gil, is that the oldest flush toilet is still here.
You gotta be kidding.
Yeah.
A flush toilet?
Yes, I'm going to show you.
Where?
When we go here, go into the next section. As a matter of fact, you still smell the doo-doo. Yes, sir.
Now, how did that work?
Now, there was a bucket up here, and they will tilt the bucket when the person is finished. It was also a shower here.
I see.
And then when they tilt the bucket, it would flush the water. As you notice there's a trough.
There's a trough.
This will go down, and there's a hole down there. The water will run out and go into a flush system.
And how old is this?
This goes back at least the 20th dynasty, about 1100 and add before the Common Era, before Christ.
1100 before Christ. Where was Rome at that time?
Didn't exist. 100 years at least before there was a Rome or Greece.
Interesting. Interesting. Now this is a side of the temple, Dr. Ben, but boy, is this dug out deep. Why?
They did that to avoid destruction by the people who came and defaced temples. So they make this very deep. If you, even the attempt to deface it, in terms of this death was done. You have, by the way you get your hand, you just touch a scene from the Nile. See the different type of
Here
fish.
there's a duck chasing the fish.
That's right, and you can see the different types.
I see.
A mullet, a snapper, and so forth.
But this was really designed to frustrate anybody who wanted to
Deface the property.
In other words, they had experienced it already.
Oh yes, he's come now in the 20th dynasty, Ramesses III.
Ramesses
he's in the
III.
20th dynasty, and he's had at least all the way from the temples going back to the 17th dynasty, all the way has been
So
defaced.
most of the figures in this temple then are cut deep like this.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
Okay, well then let's go inside the courtyard again. Lord, what a huge court. Now where are we now?
That is the colonnade with statues. Every one of those statues is a finger of Ramesses III. And you notice he used the same method of presenting himself and his sons as Ramesses II did.
This is huge.
Yes.
This is just...
It's colossal. Colossal. And when you consider, it goes all the way back in the Gill.
How long did it take to do this, and where did they get the stones from?
Well, local
All the way back in
stone.
Aswan?
No, the marble, where you use marble, that came from Aswan. Where you use the limestone, it came from the local quarries.
Now, what would this courtyard be used for? The multitudes, the common people would come here as they're called?
The common people come, and the priests,
here?
and the priests address them.
Right, but could the masses go any further inside?
No, they'll stop here.
It would be so much easier for you to buy a ticket. Sister Phyllis, how much are the tickets? $40. Thank you. $40. It's so much easier for you to just get $40 for me to have to come and say, I need $2,000. Doesn't that sound so good? So y'all get on the phone, spread the word, buy your $40 ticket. We all know.
People are upset about some things, darling.
Why are they yelling?
They want attention. They're trying to get attention so that people will listen to them.
This is our way of trying to get some media attention because they are ignoring us, they're ignoring the anti-war movement, they're ignoring the anti-government movement. We love our country, but we cannot trust our government anymore.